Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jerry. Nice to see you. I hope you had a good week.
Hope you had a good week too.
I did. A lot of struggles, but it's good. Every time I write a message, I feel like I'm going through labor pains. It's always difficult to write a message. I've been writing.
One of the highlights of the week, right?
It is. It is for me, actually. I start preparing on Monday morning or sometimes Sunday night, start reading it. And I'm always amazed at how much more I see every year. And I've been doing this now for 35 years, but never as much as I am now after our rabbi passed away. It's fallen upon me. So before, when somebody else is doing the teaching, you kind of slack off and you don't always do your homework. But now, you know, I've been reading it on my own. Miriam, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
You're good. Liar. But we don't have
you want to hang around for a little while?
And Baruch, how are things with you?
Okay.
That's an Ashkenazi way of answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did they make a movement today? I drank a little extra water, but I haven't made a movement.
Thank you for sharing that with everybody. I'm sure everyone's going to be very excited about that. Well, maybe after this Torah portion, you'll be more interested, more excited about that. Anyway, the portion is called Vayeshev, and it's the story of Joseph, which is a fantastic story. All right, we're going to read it here. I hope everyone can see it. Now, we start in chapter 37:1. And it says, Joseph dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings. But in another version, if we go to Sepharia, here it's also sojourning. But in another version that I have, you see the word
settled.
Pardon?
It says settled.
Settled, yeah, but it says migure. He was like a ger. He was a stranger. He settled in the land of where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. He was a ger. It's interesting that we take words in Hebrew, and we'll see it a little later on in this, like the word kadosh. We take words and we give them like permanent meanings, whereas Hebrew is very different, and the words can mean different things depending on the context. So a ger is the stranger among us, but we've always thought that to mean the Gentile among us. I guess at this point, maybe Jacob was still a Gentile. And he belonged to the God of Abraham and Isaac and himself, but he was still a stranger in the land. So ger can mean different things depending on the context. And then it says, here are the generations, toldot, the history of Jacob. But immediately it goes into Joseph's life. Now, Joseph was 17 years old. He was feeding the flock with his brothers. He was still a young lad. It probably is, I wonder if it's Na'ar. I forgot to look that up. Sheva, 17 years. Anyway, I'll have to look at it after. He was young. Pardon?
There is an the Huna art, the third line in Beit.
Here it is. Word. Yes. Thank you. He was a Na'ar, a young lad. Even with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. So Bilhah was the maid of Rachel, and Zilpah was the maid of Leah. But they became Jacob's wives because Leah and Rachel, both at the moment that these women were given to Jacob, they couldn't conceive. So, but it's only these two that they're talking about. And when it says with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, because he had 4 wives. And Joseph brought evil report of them to their father. So he didn't bring an evil report of all the brothers, only of the sons of Bilhah, who were, let me see if I wrote them down. I think I did, but my notes, oh yeah. So Leah's sons, the sons of, Bilhah, the sons of Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali, that's Rachel's maid, and the sons of Zilpah were Gad and Asher. Okay, so those were the only ones. It wasn't all of them, but there was enough to get them upset, because he was really, his father sent him to find out what was going on, and he brought an evil report of them back to their father. He was like spying on them, and he told his father that they weren't doing such a hot job. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was a son of his old age. And he made him a coat. Here it says of many colors. Other translations, it says,
Ornamental tunic.
yeah, ketonet pasim. Some says an ornamented tunic, and others say a tunic or a coat of long sleeves. But we get the idea that he made them this special coat because Jacob saw in his son something very special. It's like when you go into court and you see the tunic of the House of Lords, they're wearing a special robe. So we know that this was a special robe because he would have a special calling. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. And he said to them, but listen, I'm begging you, just listen to the dream I've dreamed. We were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf arose and also stood up. And then your sheaves came around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brother said to him, will you indeed rule over us? Are you going to have dominion over us? And they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. For me, Joseph was a 17-year-old, very naive young man. He honestly, I don't know if he realized what he was doing or he was doing it on purpose. I'm not sure. But all he was doing was, and I know I've done this, sometimes we blurt things out, we get other people upset, or we get excited about something and we don't realize how they're going to accept it. And then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed yet another dream, and the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me. So here he's saying the sun represents his father, the moon represents his mother, who was already gone. She had died. This was Joseph. Remember, this was Joseph's dream, and his mother was Rachel. She had died on the way to Bethlehem. And 11 stars were the 11 brothers. Bow down to me. And he told it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you, to the earth? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the saying in mind. His father realized that this was a prophetic vision that he had, and that Joseph definitely had a gift. His brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Shechem, we know, was a famous place because of, well, maybe it's infamous, because that was where the men, or the prince of Shechem, raped Jacob's daughter, Dinah, and the two boys went after all the men in the village. They made them get circumcised, and they murdered all the men. And they took all the women, they took the flocks, they took everything, all the booty. So we see his brothers went to feed their flocks in Shechem because now basically it belonged to them. And Israel said to Joseph, do not your brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, here I am. But, when I was reading this, I thought, how, Joseph may have been naive to tell the brothers the dream, But how ridiculous is Jacob, is Israel? Didn't he see what was going on in his own home? The rivalry, the hatred amongst the brothers? And yet, he's sending him to his brothers out in the field in Shechem, all that way. And he said to him, go now and see whether it is well with your brothers and well with the flock, and bring me back word. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, I pray you, where are they feeding the flock? And the man said, they've left already, for I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now, this reminds me, there's a word here, a certain man. The word here in Hebrew, mitzaehu, something like that. My Hebrew is not great. But our rabbis say that word is used when there is a special messenger or a special calling on a person that is not, it's like he's not very prominent, but yet he is, I read a really good line by a Professor Judith Hoffman. It says, the voices of less prominent people can be just as critical in driving these stories that shape the world. So this man just happened to be there in the field. And we're going to see this later with Tamar. This man, and the same word is going to be used. And so this man said, just happened to be there, and said, who are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, I pray you, where are they feeding the flock? Now, how would he have known to ask them that? How would this man all of a sudden have known where they were? But the man answered, they have left, for I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. So here you see how this stranger is playing an important part of the story. And they saw him far off. And before he came near them, they conspired against him to slay them. And they said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Come now, therefore, let's kill him and cast him into one of the pits. And we'll say an evil beast, a savage beast devoured him, and we'll see what has become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it and delivered him. He saved them out of their hands. Let's not take his life. Reuben said to them, don't shed blood. Cast him into this pit that's here in the desert, but don't lay a hand upon him. So we may, and he was already thinking he would deliver him and restore him to his father. But he didn't let them know. Now, Reuben was Leah's firstborn, and the others were the servants. And it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his coat, the coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him in the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. You know, I thought of this when I was thinking of the captives that Hamas took. They're basically in a pit, an empty, dark pit with no water in it. It's just, what a tragic story. So here he is in this dark pit, and they sat down to eat. And then they lifted their eyes and they looked, and behold, there was a caravan of Ishmaelim coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing spices and balm and laudanum, and they were going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah's the fourth in line. He said to his brothers, what good is it if we kill our brother, and hide his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. He is our brother. And his brothers listened to him. They're passed by the Midianite merchantmen. They seem to be interchangeable. Some say that the Midianites were the same as the Ishmaelites. Some say that the Midianites traded for the Ishmaelites, but there was definitely a connection when it came to the merchants. And they drew, and the boys lifted Joseph out of the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim for 20 shekels of silver. And they brought Joseph to Egypt. Joseph returned to the pit. When Reuben returned to the pit, Joseph wasn't there, and he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and says, "Where is the boy? He's not here. As for me, where shall I go?" And they took Joseph's coat, killed a male goat, and dipped the coat in the blood. Then they sent the coat of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This is what we found. Do you know whether it's your son's coat or not?" Of course, Isaac knew it, and he said, "It is my son's coat. A savage beast has devoured him. Joseph is no doubt torn into pieces." And Jacob tore his garments, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters, here's how we know that he had other daughters, although some of our rabbis say that it was one daughter and his granddaughter, but I'm not so sure that that's what this means. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He had played a favorite. He was playing a favorite, exactly what his father did, how Isaac played the favorite of Esau. You would think that Joseph would learn, but sometimes these habits go from generation to generation, and it causes a lot of trouble. When we favor one child over another, it makes it very difficult. "I will go down to the grave to my son in mourning." And his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard. Even this you could see is ordained by God. Everything that happens to us, I really believe, has a purpose. God doesn't cause it to happen, but he certainly uses it. Now, all of a sudden, we go from Joseph to Judah, right in the middle. And then after this chapter, we're going to go back to Joseph. And people ask why. Why is this interposed in between Joseph? And we have many stories about, in Judaism, about the Mashiach. And they say that there are two Mashiachs. One is the suffering servant, Mashiach ben Yosef, which we read about before, Joseph. And here it's Mashiach ben David, the conquering servant. So maybe this is what this is alluding to. Remember, you always have to stand back and not always take things literally, but see what the Torah is trying to say to us. Now, it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brothers, and he turned to a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. So this man was Hira. And it says, Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. So the Canaanite was named Shua, but the daughter was not named. And he took her and he went into her. Judah is really important in the line of Messiah, in the line of the kings, in King David. But Judah did something he was told not to do, not to marry the Canaanites. And here he took a woman, a Canaanite, he married her, she conceived and bore a son and called his name Er. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again bore a son and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chiziv when she bore him. Now Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. This is the heroine of our story. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of God. It doesn't say what he did, but God killed him. How many people are wicked in the sight of God and God kills them? We don't always know why. But these are principles that God is showing us here. Didn't only happen to him. And Judah said to Onan, go to your brother's wife and perform the levirate duty of a husband's brother to her, and raise up your seed to your brother. So this was a law. That the law hadn't come down yet in Israel, but this was a general principle in the Middle East, where if the wife of your brother died, in order to keep the seed in the family going, he was to go and marry her. And it says here, Onan knew that the seed would not be his. Now, I don't know where that comes from, because I tried looking that up, and in the levirate laws, it had to do with the seed would belong to him. He would be their they would be his responsibility. But maybe he didn't want them to have the first inheritance. It could be that. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. This is where we get the word onanism, which is the seed that's poured on the ground that goes to waste. God does not want this.
But just one thing about that, what I thought I learned many years ago, is that it's not really, I don't know if you're suggesting it's like masturbation.
Yes, that's what the rabbis say.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I understand is it's not necessarily commenting on masturbation. It's commenting on that he was trying to control maybe God's plan by spilling his seed. It's not a commentary on masturbation as such. Whether or not masturbation, that's another topic. So that's what I heard, and it makes sense to me that it's not making a principle about that. He's spilling his seed, and he's trying to orchestrate changes that God is supposed to be.
Yes, but one does not preclude the other. And I didn't go that deeply into it, but I've heard that too, Miriam.
No, I'm not contesting to you. I'm just saying.
If he goes before he gets to his woman, it goes on the ground.
Yes, exactly. And my understanding also is that God does not want that either. He wants the seed to be used to bring life into the world, not to bring death into the world, because one brings death and one brings life. But here's the added sin, that he's being disobedient to the law. So you have both things happening here. And the thing that he did was evil in the sight of the Lord, and God killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah will be grown up, lest he also die like his brothers. I think that Judah was afraid that he would die, and that's why he was afraid to give Shelah, his son, to Tamar. Maybe he thought that she was a curse. But Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So she didn't stay there. She went to her father's house. And in process of time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers to Timnah, to he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. So he went back to the same place, to Hira, this whole story began. And Tamar heard, and she said, listen, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear the sheep. And she put off her garments of her widowhood, covered herself with her veil, wrapped herself, and sat in the entrance of Enaim, which is by the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, He thought that she was a harlot. Now look at this word. Vayira Yehuda v'choshevet le. Wait a minute. Thought that she was. Where is it? Ugh.
Sita.
No, there's another word for it. It's going to come up soon. I don't see it here because it says that harlot is kedusha, and we're going to we're going to see it just a little later. I thought it was here as well. And he turned to her by the way and said, "Come, I pray thee, let me come into you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law because her face was covered. I thought this was interesting because here in the Torah, when a woman's face is covered, she's considered a harlot. And yet, in a certain religion, when a woman's face is uncovered, they're considered a harlot, and they make the women cover their face. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So she said, "What will you give me so that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send a kid from the flock, from the goats of my flock." And she said, "You need to give me a pledge until you send it." And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" And she said, "Your signet and your cord."
It's 9 o'clock.
Brian, would you put your thing on mute, please, if you're going to speak? "Your signet and your cord and the staff that is in your hand." And he gave them to her, and he came into her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, took off the veil, put on her garments again of her widowhood. Now Judah sent the kids of the goat by the hand of his friend the Adulamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. He didn't find her there. And then he asked the man of that place, saying, "Where is the harlot?" And here I think is where I saw it. Yes, it says here, Leomer, here, ha kedesha. Kedesha is harlot. You see, that word kadosh has taken on a meaning of holy. But really, as I've said before, the meaning is when you're wholly given to something. You can either be wholly given to God or wholly given, in this case, to harlotry, to evil. So the word itself does not mean like you're a saint. It depends the context of the word. Where is the kedusha that was at Enaim, by the way? And they said, "There has been no harlot here." And he returned to Judah and said, "I haven't found her." See that same word, the same root, mem tzadi aleph. And also the men of the place said, "There has been no harlot here." And Judah said, "Let her take it, let her keep it, lest she be put to shame. Behold, I set this kid, and you haven't found her." And it came to pass about 3 months later that Judah was told, saying, again, all these messages come through somebody else, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has just played the harlot. And moreover, she is with child by harlotry." And Judah says, bring her to me, bring her forth, and let her be burnt." And when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man who these are, I am with child." And she said, "Look, discern, I beg you, who are these? Whose are these? The signet, the cords, and the staff." And Judah acknowledged and said, you see, he started out to be very self-righteous. And now he was brought down a peg or two. And he said, "She is more righteous than I am." Because he did not give Shelah for as much as I did not give her my son Shelah. And he knew her again no more. The word for know in Hebrew, Yodea, here you can see that, is a very intimate understanding. He was no longer intimate with her. Now it came to pass at the time of her labor that, behold, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out the hand. The midwife took and bound upon his hand the scarlet thread, saying, this one came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that, behold, his brother came out. And she said, why have you made a breach for yourself? And she called his name Peretz. And afterwards came out his brother, who had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah, which means like a bright color like the scarlet. So we see this next set of twins is going to be very different than that first set of twins, which is Jacob and Esau. This set of twins is going to be, the first set of twins is almost like the breakup of the tribes of Israel with the battles between Jacob and Esau. But this set of twins, Peretz, is going to be in the line of Messiah. I think I wrote it down. I have to get better with my my notes. Anyway, here we go. Now we go back to Joseph. Joseph is brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hand of the Ishmaelim that had brought him down there. So we see God working here, because he could have been bought by anyone, but here he's bought by the officer, like a captain of the guards, an Egyptian. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. Everything he did, we're going to watch and see how he prospered. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him, that the Lord made everything that he did to prosper in his hand. And that's what happens in our lives. When we are truly walking with God, it doesn't mean we're going to become wealthy, but prosperous means we're rich in our soul, we have everything we need. Isn't that what it says in the Pirkei Avot? The man who is rich is the one who is happy with what he has. And Joseph found favor in his sight, and he ministered to him. And he appointed him overseer over his house and everything that he had put in his hand. So this man trusted Joseph implicitly. And it came to pass from the time he appointed him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And this is very interesting, because wherever our people have gone throughout the world, wherever God has placed us, the land the country has been blessed. And they are blessed until they turn their back on us. And that's when the curses begin, once they begin to harm us. These are principles, pictures. Do you see what's happening here? And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left everything that he had in Joseph's hand. And having him, he didn't know anything except what he ate. He knew nothing about what was going on in his house. That's how much he trusted him. Now, Jacob was handsome. Joseph was a beautiful form, fair to look upon. And why does it say that? Because of the next stage here. Because something had to happen next. It came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Listen, my master, having me, does not know anything that's in his house. He has put everything in my hand. He's not greater in this house than I am. That's how much power, authority he's given me in this house. He hasn't kept anything back from me, but you, except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? When we sin, not only are we sinning against our fellow man, but more importantly, against God, because we can't hide from God. We may be able to hide sin from human beings, but we can never hide from God.
You
And
know, it
yeah.
takes a lot of Joseph. It takes a lot of courage and restraint, because I hear so many times when it's a terrible excuse, but when people will try and justify even rape by saying, you know, men are built in a certain way and blah blah blah, and they can't help it. You know, that's really not. That's a terrible, terrible excuse for committing a crime.
Exactly.
The Shear, you know, he just knew it was wrong. You know, there's no excuse for anyway. I just always noticed that this is very special, an extra special thing about
Exactly. Exactly. You know, God gave us bechira chufshit, free will, which means that we have control over our lives. Nobody can tell us how to think. Nobody can tell us how to be. That's up to us. And it certainly helps when we have a relationship with our God, because that's truly when our free will comes into play, when we have a relationship with God, because God tells us, I give you today good, life and death, good and evil. I ask you to choose life. He wants us to choose life. And here, Joseph is choosing life. And there's another expression called midah keneged midah. We get what we give. And we will see at some point that Joseph will receive what he is giving. And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, she didn't let up. And he didn't listen to her, to lie with her or to be with her. It came to pass on a certain day, when he went into the house to do his work, there was no one, none of the men of the house were there. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and he fled. And he got out of the house. It came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled, she called to the men of their house and spoke to them, saying, look, he has brought a Hebrew to us to mock us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out in a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment and fled, and he got out of the house. So here she's building her case. And she laid up his garment next to her until his master came home. And she spoke to him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to mock me. And this is what happened. When I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment by me and fled. And then when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, she said these words, this is what your servant did to me. His wrath was kindled. But then we're not sure who he's so angry with. But if you read the next verse, it says, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. If he had believed his wife, he would have chopped off his head there and then. But that's not what happened. He put him in the best of the prisons, where all the king's prisoners were, because there he would have freedom. There he would be away from the wife. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison.
I was just wondering, like, I wonder if she's the type of woman who's done this more than once.
Guaranteed.
So that her husband knew.
I'm sure.
You know.
And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hands all the prisoners that were in the prison. Look, he put him over all the prisoners. And whatever they did there, he did it. The keeper of the prison did not look to anything that was under his hand, just like Potiphar, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made him prosper. When we remember these principles, the Lord will always take care of us and make us prosper. And this is a very special passage. Now it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry against his two officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, because this was the king's prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph to be with them. So he put them under his care. And he took care of them, he ministered to them. And they continued 1 season in ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them. Each man his dream in 1 night. Each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king who were bound in the prison. And Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the ward of the master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We have dreamed a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it." Now Joseph already must have understood that God had given him those dreams when he was young. But at that time, Joseph was boasting about his dreams. This one is a little different, because look what he says. At this point, he's now very humbled. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup. And I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Now Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh shall lift up your head and restore you to your office. And you will give the king, the Pharaoh, the cup into his hand, after you, the way you did before, in your former manner, when you were the butler. But remember me when it will be well with you, and show me chesed, kindness. I pray you, make mention of me to Pharaoh and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon." Now when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, "I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the uppermost basket, there was all kinds of baked goods, baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head." Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will also lift up your head, but this time he will hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat your flesh from off of you." And it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler back to his butlership, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, and he hanged the chief butler as Joseph had interpreted to them. But the chief butler did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. That's the end of this portion. So there's a lot in it. Hello, do I still have you with me? Miriam, you have you're on mute. Jerry, are you still there?
It's hiding behind the newspaper.
Oh, there you go. Let's see. Did
I wonder, like whenever I
We
hear,
wanted the other guy because her husband couldn't get it up.
Brian, this is not what this is about. Behave yourself, please. This is a video for people who are listening out there. We don't know the situation. We do know that the idea was to show that Joseph was a man of God. And that's what we all have to remember, to be people of God. Sorry, Miriam, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, whenever I've read this story or read this story before about the butler and the baker, I always wondered what was it about the butler that made the Pharaoh have his head cut off. You know, like there's something in which he was not favorable. You know, so you know, maybe he sensed something from the butler wasn't anyway, whatever. It's just interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
Because I was thinking sometimes in life, when you think people are good and they're not, they're just being righteous, self-righteous, and other people who are really righteous and walking before God, and how people often think, you know, oh, so and such a wonderful, whatever it is, politician, whatever, and they're fooled by appearances, and you just don't know.
Exactly. But that's exactly what's happening in the world today. We're fooled by so many appearances, and there are very few. I'm so grateful that there still are people who are standing up for what is right and what is true. There are still enough people who are followers of the Torah and of his commandments. I think otherwise the world would be in a much worse situation than it is today. But when we go through trials like Joseph did, I mean, here he's sold by his brothers. He's hated by his brothers. He's put into a prison, and he doesn't know why. But in the next portion, we're going to see why. But all this is the saga of the history of our people. It's called Toldot Yaakov, the history of Jacob. Begins really with Joseph, and all these stories are not meant to be taken literally, but they're meant for us to stand back and see, what can we glean? What are the principles that we can live by? Because when we're faithful to God, he blesses us. When we're not, we suffer. And it's not that God is punishing us, but we suffer the consequences. We see that, you know, right here at Hanukkah time. We're about to celebrate Hanukkah. And it's not an easy time for us, this Hanukkah, because like the people who suffered so much at the time of the Maccabees, you know, the Greek kingdom came in. These stories aren't really taught. We're taught about you know, we light the lights, we eat latkes, we eat foods cooked in oil, we eat sufganiot. It's always about food. You know, we say we fought, they attacked us, we fought, we won, let's eat. That's the history of our people. But the reason that we won is because God is with us. And it's not about the food. But what we need to look at is, what were we doing as a people, just before this attack happened at the time of the Maccabees. And it says in the Maccabees, the book of the Maccabees, a group of young renegades, they said, you know what? Ever since we've separated ourselves from the Gentiles, we've suffered. Let's align ourselves with the Greek kingdom. They went and they built a gymnasium, in Jerusalem, and they wanted to be part. They wanted to assimilate. We are not allowed to assimilate. Look at the assimilation that's going on in the world right now. God chose us. He made us a people, a chosen people. A chosen people has nothing to do with being proud to be chosen because we didn't choose ourselves. Chosen means that we have responsibility. We need to be like Joseph. We need to be a person who says no when they need to say no and yes when they need to say yes. And that takes wisdom. And there's only through the Torah can we learn true wisdom.
So it's assimilation in the sense of not race, but a belief and following obedience to God.
No, race has nothing to do with this.
No, that's what I'm saying. It has nothing to do, just because people understand often the word assimilation is a Jewish person shouldn't marry a non-Jewish person. That's what the layman's term often is understood to be.
Right.
So I'm just saying it's talking about principles and values and obedience to God.
The Torah has a very different perspective of who is a Jew, of who is considered a Jew. Because first of all, the word Jew comes from Yehudah, the fourth son, Yehudah. His name means praiser of God. The true Yehudim are praisers of God. Just because someone calls himself a Jew doesn't make him a praiser of God. So we have to be careful when we define terms. And when we talk about assimilation, there's only, you're either with God or you're not. Those are the two camps.
You're seeing that even now in this horrible war that's happening. Like I was just watching, there's this black lady, I don't know her name or anything, and her accent sounded Jamaican, but she's passionately pro-Israel, and she's speaking, and I'm seeing she has her dreadlocks and all that, and I said, Baruch Hashem, she is worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's really, she's assimilating with the truth. She's mixing with, so assimilation, the kingdom of God has many peoples.
Exactly. It's like,
and then I see it, unfortunately, other Jewish people who have even gone so far as to this is the real extremes, thank God it's not all, but who are even pro Hamas. I saw something about those who, like, it baffles my mind.
Yeah.
Just don't understand it.
No, I don't either. But I don't know.
Thank God it's not a large, but there are some who are vocal about that.
Yes. I have, again, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. We have to be careful what we do, who we are. And that's, I don't think we can completely choose that. We have to have an understanding of how God works of God in our lives. And we don't do that ourselves. Look, God had to reveal himself to Abram. Abram didn't all of a sudden know. It says that God spoke to Abram. God spoke to Noah. God speaks to people. God reveals himself to people. I don't know why or what it's going to take for God to reveal himself to the whole world.
Well, for people, I think that's a mystery in the sense that, otherwise we could become a bit self-righteous or look, well, right. God didn't reveal himself to you. It could almost right. be ridiculously a self-righteous thing.
Exactly.
But I think, when God says, in Deuteronomy that the secret things are for God and the things revealed are for us. I think there's something we just cannot understand. Like, when God has put his spirit in us, there could be some way in which some people don't realize what they're squashing, but they're squashing God's spirit. So that's their free will. It's not that they were given the same thing as you and I or whoever else. So, there's something we can't understand the mechanism, but we have to realize that we're equal in the sense that, God is not withholding himself from anybody.
No, he put his spirit into every human being. What makes you look at a flower and say, this is from God? And another person will look at a flower and it doesn't compute that that's from God.
But what I'm saying is that's what I think is a mystery, because otherwise we'll boast and say, well, look how I see things and look how that person. So I think we just have to say thank you if we've been blessed to have that, something that to recognize God
Right.
within us, God's being with us, and just say thank you, because otherwise we'll become arrogant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to do. Who
Yeah,
are we to understand the state of the soul?
right.
The
Exactly.
soul is outside this dimension, the spirit. It's another dimension. It's like, how can we possibly explain it as finite creatures that we are?
Right.
Yeah. Jerry, you're very quiet today.
I was very quiet today. Yes.
Does this spark any thoughts in you? Anything?
Well, I was actually looking forward to these two parsha because they're quite significant parshim and very emotional.
Yeah. Was there something that came to you while I was reading? Because you're allowed to intersperse your thoughts.
Well, maybe next one, God willing, the next parsha.
Okay. Trying to see if there's anything else in my notes here. I think we pretty well covered it. So anyway, if that's the case, I want to wish you a happy Hanukkah tomorrow, Thursday, tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
We light the first candle already tomorrow night. And we thank God for his miracles, that he won the battle against the ancient Greeks, and he will win the battle against Hamas, because that's his promise. He said, I will wipe out the Amalekites, Amalek, from off the face of this earth, which is, I don't know if it's going to come now or it'll come sometime in the future, but God always keeps his promises. So during this Festival of Lights, do you know why this Festival of Lights is 8 days? Jerry, do you know why Hanukkah is 8 days?
Well, I'm not sure why it was 8 days. I know that the oil was burning for 8 days, but I'm not sure why they needed it 8 days.
Well, when you read the story, the only place that we find the story of Hanukkah is in the book of Maccabees. There was no story of oil in the book. That's a little bit of a made-up story. That's probably more in the Midrashim. And we've had other stories of oil in the Torah, of the miracle of oil. But the miracle was that we were able to take back the temple. The small group of guerrillas under the high priest, under Matityahu and his sons, they fought many battles. Every time we prayed before the battle, we won. And finally, we won against this huge army. We were able to take back the temple, rededicate it, clean it up. Now, what was the last festival that we had? We have the 3 festivals in the fall and 3 in the spring. So we have Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. How many days is Sukkot?
8.
8 days. So this last festival they would have not had the temple. So now they went into the temple, lit the menorah, just like at the time of Sukkot, and were able to celebrate Sukkot. Hanukkah just means rededication. They dedicated the temple so that we could go back and celebrate Sukkot. That's why it's 8 days.
But Jerry's partly, it's true. It's true what Jerry says about the miracle, that now the oil lasted for 8 days.
That's not in the book of Maccabees. That's
it's
a story.
not?
No, that story is made
Okay,
up.
that story, the whole story is not okay.
The whole story is made up. It has nothing to do with the oil.
Okay.
They
Because
say
I thought the miracle
they
was
say
the
that they found enough oil, but that's nowhere in the book of Maccabees.
Oh, okay.
No, that's a story that a midrash that came afterwards, that they found only enough oil to make to light the candle, and it lasted for 8 days until they could make more oil. But that's
So what
not
was the Maccabee story then?
the
They
Maccabees story.
rededicated the temple.
Yeah, and then we were
Okay.
able to celebrate Sukkot.
It says Sukkot, the Maccabees.
No, but that's the only reason it's 8 days. That's the understanding.
No, but that makes sense. But I didn't think it doesn't say literally Sukkot, but we understand it to be.
We understand exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because they finally took back the temple and they were able to celebrate Sukkot.
Where did you get the significance of the 8 days, Peggy?
Because of Sukkot, the understanding. It was.
Why from Sukkot the 8 days?
Because we couldn't celebrate it. We just passed Sukkot and we weren't able to celebrate it. And it's the time of year when Sukkot would have passed just here.
Because the temple hadn't been rededicated.
Yeah, we didn't have the temple then. So we cleaned it up and then we were able to celebrate Sukkot.
Right. Miriam and Peggy knows, Miriam, that people perhaps emphasize that the oil lasted 8 days, but the significant part was the victory.
Exactly.
Was the victory, and people seem to the oil lasting 8 days seems to overshadow that idea, and that's the main miracle, was the victory.
Exactly.
But we're using that the oil, but everyone says it's the oil lasted 8 days, and that's what Peggy is one of the people that says perhaps the true significance, that it was the winning of the battle and not that the oil.
Exactly. And because then what happens is we eat oily foods because we put our emphasis on the oil. Now, there's a story about a widow who had 2 young boys in the Torah, and her husband died, and she didn't have enough money. She didn't know what she was going to do. And she prayed to Elisha, the prophet. She didn't pray to him. She asked Elisha, I don't know what to do. I don't have enough. They're going to sell my sons. I'm going to have to sell my sons just so that I can live. And Elisha says, well, what do you have in the house? And she said, I have 1 jar of oil. This is, I think, where maybe this story came from, because this is a story of a miracle. I have 1 jar of oil. At Hanukkah we sing Kad Katan, the small jar of oil. And he said, send your boys out to all the neighbors and gather as many jars as you possibly can, empty jars. And so she did that. She sent them out. And he said, okay, now bring them into the house. She said, I have no more jars. Bring them in, close the door, and start pouring. And she started pouring the oil into all the jars. And this one little jar poured out oil into all these other jars. And then when the oil stopped pouring, she said, I have no more oil. It stopped. He says, okay, now take it, sell the oil. You'll have enough to pay all your debts and live till the time that your sons grow up and can take care of you. So that's in the Torah. That's a true story of the miracle of oil. And sometimes maybe these stories get displaced or misplaced, but if you go to the book of Maccabees, And the only place that we can find the book of Maccabees is in the apocryphal writings, which are the writings that take place after the canon of the Tanakh was closed. The Maccabees never made it in there. It's in the Catholic Bible for whatever reasons. We have that in the book of Enoch and several books that didn't make it into the canon. And this was before the New Testament came out. So we have this beautiful story of oil, but the story of oil in the at Hanukkah is just a midrash. And we always have to say, what is God trying to show us? He wants us always to trust him. The bottom line in absolutely everything is to learn how to trust him. It's not easy. You know, the first thing that people are doing these days, they're screaming, where's God in all this? Where's God in all this? As if it's God's fault. And we have to be careful.
Two things, Peggy. One thing, I think you place the emphasis on the miracle of the battle. And the other comment, which I'm not sure if we mentioned, was that the 8 days. 8 days is the circle or the ring of the week, and it's an eternity. It's like the Monday to the Monday, or the Sunday to the Sunday, or the Saturday to the Saturday. So 8 is a very, very significant number as well.
Yes, it signifies new beginnings. That's the beauty of Sukkot, because Sukkot is the only holiday that we read about in the book of Zechariah, when it talks about the future prophecies after the big battle, and the Messiah will have come, and it talks about how every nation will celebrate, will send ambassadors to Israel. Israel will live in peace. We won't have enemies anymore. And ambassadors will come from every nation around the world to celebrate Sukkot. And it says those who don't come down, who don't send their ambassadors, will not have rain. They won't be blessed. And it's a time of great rejoicing. It'll be a new beginning for the world. Boy, am I looking forward to those days.
You think that humans have to be prepared to live in peace? And the idea is to live in peace. We have to accept to do things where we have to accept new challenges, because a human likes new challenges to overcome. So it's a different level. To live in peace is a different level.
But look at the story of Joseph. His brothers were so angry with him, it says they couldn't even speak peaceably to him. And yet afterwards, look what happens afterwards. Joseph was an arrogant little kid. He was a spoiled brat. And he boasted about his dreams. And here, look what he was put through. He was sold as a slave. He was really basically stripped of everything. He ended up becoming a prisoner, sold to this Potiphar, where he had to work. He used his gifts to show who he was, how God was blessing him. And it says even Potiphar saw that the Lord, it says that Potiphar saw that the Lord was with him. Yud He Vav He was with him. And then afterwards, it talks about how, oh my goodness, I hate when this happens to me. I forget my train of thought. After he's humbled, then he's able to have peace in his life, and all those around him find peace through him, are blessed through the things that he does. So to me, Joseph, all these are pictures of what's to come in the end. One day, I think the whole world will live in peace. It says the lion will lie down with the lamb. The child will eat at the den of the viper.
Yeah. A comment, Peggy, on why often you might have other things, like one of them being a humbling before a greatness comes out. Why is that necessary? And
I can only speak personally because I was very arrogant. I sometimes come across as arrogant, but I'm not. It's just my personality. But I have been so humbled in my life. I thought I had all the answers. And
why is that required?
I think I have an idea about that. Like, what is humility? True humility is simply not lifting yourself up as the cause of your whatever, your happiness, your joy. You have a part in it, and that you have free will, but you are not. True humility is knowing and walking with God and having a relationship with God and knowing that you're like in partnership with God. And what's arrogance? Arrogance is the opposite. I did it my way. Even that song, I did it my way. It's such a denial of anything above our own self. And I think that's the principle of it. So it's not, and sometimes it takes hard times to break you down so that you stop seeing yourself. You start to see maybe more of the truth that you aren't all you're cracked up to be. I'm not saying we're bad, but sometimes it takes. I remember once when I was 15 years old, I was showing off with friends and all that, and I told my mother to shut up in this particular argument, and she just slapped me across the face. And I'll never forget that. It was like my face stung, and I knew that I deserved it. It was like it took, I'm just saying we have to be knocked down sometimes to see the reality of who we are.
It seems that we need a positive and a negative to go forward. And if we look at the complete universe, the earth has a positive and negative. I mean, there's infinite examples, but like it has the magnetic field and it's positive and negative. The earth is revolving around the sun. There's a pull and a push, the centrifugal force and a pull. We need somehow, we have to have a positive and a negative to go forward. And that's why I'm just wondering what would be the negative if we had eternal peace, and are we ready to accept a positive without a negative?
I think you're talking more in the realm of like a created world, like this idea of black and white and up and down. And I think
even the created world, we won't talk too much. Even the created world, Hashem created the world from tohu vavohu, from chaos. So it didn't create. First, it was from nothing, became something, and from chaos in Bereshit, it was from chaos. In other words, I'm emphasizing the two sides. We need I'm not going to say a balance, but so this is why I say, can we accept? Are humans ready for peace, eternal peace? Will they accept it? Like life would have no meaning if there was not death.
But maybe anyway, this could go on forever. But in my
because in the end, there's going to be we believe in the resurrection of the dead and the reestablishment or the rebuilding of what's the new Gan Eden, the new Garden of Eden. So we won't be the way we are today. We don't know what it's going to be like in those days. Sometimes I'm not sure how much I believe in the New Testament, but I've read it, I've studied it. And some of the pictures that they show in there, maybe they're true. I don't know. But it's, they say when Yeshua had died and his body appeared to them and he says, don't touch me because I have not yet risen. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe it's giving us a picture of the bodies will not be what they are now. He said there'll be no marriage. We don't know the state of the soul.
I think it's
how we will be.
The cocoon.
Maybe we'll look like those figures, those figures in cocoon.
Yeah, our state of minds will be not exactly the same as we are right now, to be in a different.
We may not be limited by these physical bodies. If we have a different body that can be a spiritual body, then we won't need even to communicate in the same way, because maybe it'll be telepathically. We won't have guile, because everybody will be able to read each other. I don't think we could possibly understand the nature of the soul to be able to answer these questions now in this physical body the way we are now.
Anyhow, like you said, Miriam, this is an infinite question. So
yeah, exactly. Baruch, are you still there? Baruch, I hope I didn't insult you before. Are you okay?
I'm still here.
You're being a good boy?
The body's not good.
Your body's not good? You don't feel well?
No, I have the bottle here, but still, I'm coming before I can get it in the bottle.
Okay, I understand. Well, you know what? One day you're going to have a brand new body. You won't have any of these problems anymore. It's not easy to live in these physical bodies in this crazy world the way it is. So we just have to continue to pray for each other. We pray for the families. Jerry, if you can get ready the Aaronic benediction, but we pray for the families of those who've lost family members in Israel, for the captives who are still held by these madmen, and these children, the people who are suffering from what they've experienced. We ask that God would heal their souls and heal their minds, and we pray that God would bring his people back to him, that we would return to the Torah. I hear stories of that every day, but I don't want people, we're not asking people to return to a religion. We want people to return to God's Torah, which is very different. It's a relationship with the living God. Go ahead, Jerry.
The congregation prepared themselves to receive the Aaronic benediction by reciting the prayer, "May it be thy will, Lord our God and God of our fathers, that this blessing which thou hast commanded to pronounce upon thy people Israel may be a perfect blessing, forever free from stumbling and iniquity. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'kedushaso shel Aaron, v'tzivonu levarech et amo Yisrael v'yahavo yavarechecho Adonai v'yishmorecho Yoer Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka Yiso Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. V'samu et shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani arvorchem.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. So shall they place my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. I wish you all a wonderful rest of the week, a Shabbat Shalom, some Hanukkah Sameach, and we'll see you, God willing, next week with the parasha Miketz. Good night, everybody.
Night, Shabbat Shalom.